Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
America's export of soybeans helps the U.S. maintain a positive agricultural trade balance. Nebraska contributes half of its soybeans for export. The protein and oil content in soybeans enhance the growing demand for higher protein diets. The Nebraska Soybean Board promotes research to develop new soybean varieties with higher protein and oil content for major agricultural markets. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine, and major funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.
Welcome to this week's edition of Market Journal. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. On this episode, Roy Smith analyzes the USDA's August crop report. Ron Plain describes profits in the hog industry. Gary Zoubek explains how to schedule the final irrigation on soybeans. And Dan Steinkruger discusses sign up for livestock emergency programs. Roy Smith is our grain market analyst this week. The USDA is expecting record U.S. corn and soybean crops for the 2014 harvest. In its August crop report released Tuesday, the agency projected corn production at more than 14 billion bushels on record yields. Its soybean forecast would set new highs in area harvested, average yield, and by about 500 million bushels overall production. Nebraska is expected to be the third largest corn producer this year and the fifth largest grower of soybeans. We talked with Roy from the Soybean Management Field Day in Auburn Tuesday after the release. We began by asking about the current condition of crops near his farm in Cass County, Nebraska.
Cass County, eastern Cass County, the crops look really good. Some places have had 3 or 4 inches of rain. That hasn't happened at my place yet, but we've had some small rains that have really kept things looking pretty good, especially the corn. And the beans are, in some cases, putting on some second growth, and that's going to help them too. So, and driving down here from Cass County, crops in general look pretty good. Some places needing rain and some doing all right.
Today was the fun day of the month. We got the August crop report. The markets aren't closed yet, but what was your reaction to the numbers?
My reaction was that, first of all, that things are not that far off from what the trade expected. We actually had the corn number come in a little less than what the trade expected. The bean market within the range, but sort of towards the high end of the range. And the way it looks at this juncture, the trade is looking at it the same way, and so we've got soybeans down pretty hard and corn almost unchanged as we speak.
Where do you think, how is the situation, I guess I should say, for cash corn in this state? Do you think there's still a lot left?
When you're talking about cash corn from last year's crop,
yes.
and I really don't have any way of judging that, except that every once in a while you'll catch a hint that there's some bins sitting around here that are still full. We saw that from the storm damage up in northeast Nebraska, that there was some corn scattered all over the ground from bins that had the roofs blow off. Boy, I would hope that there isn't any old crop corn left, but I'm afraid that that's not the case, and that if that is the case, the owners have really taken it in the shorts in terms of price.
What do you do about it now? How do you try to move that crop maybe before harvest?
I guess you need to work with your elevator person and move it any way you can, because what I'm seeing is that everybody right now is anticipating a huge crop. And elevator in my community, brand new elevator, went into operation the 1st of October last year, and they're already getting a pad ready to store corn outside. And this is non-irrigated corn in Cass County, so you know, it's pretty overwhelming when you think that we may be here in the first part of August getting ready to pile corn on the ground. But I guess they want to be safe, and so that's what they're doing.
Let's move to the bean market. With the new crop, have you priced anything yet?
I priced some new crop beans earlier this week, just from the standpoint that I don't store beans on my farm, and so first of all, I want to have a place to go with some, and I want to have some price before we get too close to harvest. And $10 cash beans, not going to get rich on it, but it's making some money, and sometimes it's just best to, when you get the opportunity and you look at the seasonal charts, and the seasonal charts show good chance for having a decent price in the month of August, and I hadn't done any yet, so it was time to do some.
And more often than not, the price on the 1st of September is going to be better than the 1st of August. Is that what you were mentioning before?
Well, the price the 1st of September, because the September crop report comes out on the 10th, and that's really the key. And between now and September 10th, there could be some good opportunities to make sales, but chances are after the 10th of September, the market goes in the tank. And so, you know, that's what I look for. Try to get something sold in August or the first 9 days of September, and then not sell anything while harvest is going on.
That's one of your old sayings, I guess I should say. Sell before the September crop report.
Absolutely. Sell before the September crop report, or be ready to capture the dead cat bounce when it comes along after harvest is pretty much over.
Now, is there a chance we could see a bit of a frost scare put a rally into either of these markets?
Well, there's always that possibility, and one of the things that I guess I'm a little concerned about is that we've had a cool summer. It's been a long time since we've had a cool summer, and people have forgotten what it's like to have corn wet at harvest time. Beans is probably not too much of a worry, because we don't very often see frost damage on beans. But if we would happen to get an early frost and maybe stop the development of the corn, it could be a real interesting fall, because it might be difficult to get the corn dry.
Next week, Jim Robb from the Livestock Marketing Information Center will join us to analyze cattle markets. We also have Hog Market Analysis this week with University of Missouri Extension economist Ron Plain. It's likely been a pretty good summer for those producers who escaped effects of the Porcine Epidemic Diarrhea virus or any other major problems. As you'll hear Ron say, the most profitable 4 months in history occurred in March, April, May, and June. While exact death loss totals from PEDV are unknown, any estimate includes million following the number. That's tightened pork inventory and led to incredibly high prices. At the same time, the projections for huge corn and soybean crops have held down feed costs. When we began our discussion Tuesday, we asked Ron to analyze how markets moved through July and into August.
Well, the kind of the wrong way, Jeff, but that's not surprising. We saw hog prices right around $130 on a carcass weight basis at the start of July. We're down more like $111, $112 on a carcass weight basis now.
Is that following the normal seasonal decline then?
Yes, it's not a surprise. Normally, the peak in hog prices comes sometime around June, and we see a fairly steady decline as we move into later summer, and that's what we're experiencing, and unfortunately, it's probably going to continue.
The high prices that we saw, though, this summer, does that make that decline even steeper?
Probably so. We had record prices by huge margins, and so a little bit more of a return to normal is going to give us a bigger than typical decline as we move from June to, say, November.
Are producers still seemingly packing on the pounds to their pigs before they market those animals?
Yes, they are. Yeah, we've seen very heavy slaughter weights this year. In fact, the last 12 weeks have averaged more than 10 pounds heavier than a year ago. Year to date, heavyweight hogs have added about 3% to pork production compared to where we've been if weights were the same as a year ago.
What about slaughter numbers, Ron?
Well, seasonally, we're now at the time when slaughter numbers usually pick up, and that's one of the reasons for lower hog prices. And so as we move forward, we're expecting increased hog slaughter, and that's going to keep pressure on prices. Daily slaughter usually peaks somewhere around the 1st of December.
Where are the current break-evens for the farrow to finish producer?
Well, on a live weight basis, somewhere around 56, 57 cents a pound has been break even. We're going to see that decline, it looks like, because it looks like we've got an awfully big corn crop out there to harvest. On a carcass weight basis, somewhere around 75 cents a pound of carcass has been pretty close to break even in recent weeks.
We're off those record highs, though, per animal?
Yes, although it's still a very good year. The 4 most profitable months ever for hog producers were March, April, May, and June of this year. We don't have the July numbers, but it's going to rank right up there with it. August is going to be a good month, but probably not a record high. We expect producers to continue to turn a profit each month for the rest of this year and well into next year. It's just that probably not quite as good as June and July.
Are we seeing expansion in the industry now, Ron, or does that remain talk?
Well, it's tough to say. Sow slaughter's been down some from a year ago, but our gilt slaughter data wouldn't indicate much gilt retention. I still think there's so much uncertainty over the PED virus out there that we're not seeing much change in the size of the nation's sow herd.
Last time you were on, we talked about the export market. Is the industry still getting continued help from that market?
Yeah, Jeff, absolutely. Exports have been up every month of this year. During the first half, we exported 7% more pork than a year ago, and that's despite the fact that meat values, cutout values of pork, has been up over 25% from a year ago. So we're selling more to foreigners at a higher price.
We talked a few months ago about Russia and their ractopamine issue with the U.S. Now that they've banned ag goods coming into that country from the U.S., does that have a big impact on United States producers?
Well, no. As you said, we had been exporting almost nothing to Russia anyway because of the ractopamine issue. And so we did ship a bit to them in May and June, but we're going to see that drop back to zero. So it's not a big factor on the markets because they've pretty well been out of the market for well over a year.
How would you describe the effects, the continued effects of the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus?
Well, it's why we had record hog prices this year. It's also been related to the very heavy weights as producers try to make up for the shortage of hogs. One of the key things is it looks like we're going to live with PED virus for a while, and also it looks like it may be very seasonal, with most of the baby pig death occurring during the winter months and less during the summer months, which means from a slaughter standpoint, 6 months after those pigs die is when they won't be in packing plants. So it really is going to shorten summer hog slaughter, but not have as great an impact on winter hog numbers.
Well, we get updated information on meat prices next week when the USDA releases its average costs for the month of July. Nebraska's soybean crop remains in notable shape and ahead of progress. 70% is rated good to excellent, and 80% of the crop is setting pods, 9 points ahead of the state's 5-year average. The USDA's crop production report projects Nebraska's soybeans will average 52 bushels per acre, second only to Illinois' 54. Now on the downhill slope of the growing season, farmers can begin to think about scheduling final irrigation passes of the year. Once beans begin maturity at R7, they no longer use water, but determining how much water to put on before then can be tricky. At a Nebraska Soybean Board-funded field day in Auburn Tuesday, Gary Zoubek explained how farmers can time the final watering using the beans on the site as an example.
Well, these beans are in the beginning pod fill, the R5. We've got some beans that are a little later are at R4. R4 beans are going to need about 9 inches of water to maturity. These here are going to need about 6 or 6.5 inches.
Now that doesn't necessarily mean you need 6.5 inches of rain because you might have something in the profile yet?
Yes, depends upon every situation is going to be different. These here probably have about 2 inches of available moisture in the profile. So that means we're going to need probably about 4.5 more inches, either come in the form of rainfall, hopefully rainfall, or potentially irrigation.
You say that it's important to leave room for rainfall at the end. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that's our goal whenever we monitor and manage irrigation on corn or soybeans. What we want to do is, in most years, leave the profile
as dry as we can without hurting yield. So that's typically, we use a 50 or 60% depleted area. That way, during the off season, Mother Nature will refill it with that moisture that's free.
At what point then do you want to be at 50 to 60% of
As we get to R7, nearing maturity, that's where we'd want to have it at either 50 or 60% depleted. Kind of depends upon your soils, your willingness to, trust, your risk tolerance.
You have some tools that are available that can help producers determine how to schedule their final irrigation of the season. Tell me about those.
Well, first of all, we've got a NEB guide that's very popular. It can be used to schedule irrigations for the last one for corn, soybeans, and grain sorghum. We also have our crop water app that we've just released an update to it where it lets you put in your sensor readings or your estimate of soil moisture. You put in your crop stage and your maturity, and then you calculate. It will tell you how much more moisture you're going to need to get your crop to maturity.
If someone hasn't used sensors before, what would you recommend, or why would you recommend they try them out maybe next year if they haven't put them in yet?
Well, we feel the sensors give you another tool to estimate the status of your soil water. And that, that's one of the key things. We don't want to keep it too wet. We definitely don't want to keep it too dry. And it doesn't have any feelings. You put them out there and they just give you a number. Then you use a chart to, estimate the water that's left. Because if I'm going out and I'm feeling it, if it's hot and dry, it's going to feel really dry. If it's cool, wet, and cold, it's going to feel wet. Whereas sensors, they don't have those feelings. They don't lie.
And ET gauges as well?
An ET gauge is another great tool. We really like them because they take into account the current conditions, the temperatures, the solar radiation, the wind, and all that. And then they give you a good estimate of what the crop ET is. August, I can go out during county fair and it's been 100 degrees out there, but my ET gauge only dropped an inch because we had so much humidity. Then I know I don't have to be worrying too much about irrigation. If it drops 2.5 inches, I'm going to worry a whole lot and know, depending on my stage of growth, if it's during the reproductive stages, I'm really going to need to irrigate. And so it's in my backyard. It's representative of several miles around. I feel that it's a great tool and it's pretty economical.
On the Market Journal website, you can find a link to a NEB guide on predicting the last irrigation of the season, as well as a link to UNL's Crop Water app. As of July 31st, the USDA said it has processed 165,000 claims for the Livestock Indemnity Program, the Livestock Forage Disaster Program, and the Tree Assistance Program. Those claims have totaled about $1.85 billion. The agency is implementing components of the new 5-year Farm Bill, including changes in commodity and dairy programs. Nebraska Farm Service Agency Director Dan Steinkruger joined us earlier this week to discuss those updates, including sign up for livestock emergency programs in this state.
Well, as you know, we're running a large livestock program in Nebraska for the Livestock Indemnity Program and the Livestock Forage Program. We think we've got about half of our cattle producers through the doors. We've paid about $142 million to 8,000 or 9,000 producers. So it's a significant program, very busy in all our offices.
You've reached the cap of $125,000 on some of those operations?
We do. We've got a lot of large livestock operations in Nebraska, and we've capped and hit the limit on a lot of those operations.
If a farmer or rancher hasn't signed up yet for the indemnity program or the forage disaster program, when do you urge them to do that by?
Well, they need to get a hold of our office now and make an appointment. We're really trying to get the bulk of this work out of the way over the next few weeks and would like to be completed in September. this fiscal year with the other Farm Bill programs that are ahead of us.
This is retroactive to when on these livestock emergency programs?
It goes back to 2012, so it covers drought losses for 2012, 2013, and in the southwest part of Nebraska in 2014.
And the livestock forage program would cover up to 60% of feed costs?
It does. Okay. It provides assistance there. Our hay and forage and feed costs were significantly higher at that time, and it provides some assistance for that. It is kind of ironic that the livestock industry is doing quite well right now, but part of that is because of the drought impacts that occurred in the prior years.
Let's move into crops. You said you've sent letters out to producers letting them know that they can update their base numbers for yield and acres, correct?
Yes, we sent out a letter nationally to all owners and operators with the acreage history and yields on their farm. It's an informational letter to try to get started on the ARC PLC program.
Update me on where we are in that process overall.
Well, we're just getting started. The base and yield process is first. Then later this year we'll look at the election on which program an individual chooses. And then the sign-up is actually scheduled for 2015.
Tell me about the crop insurance guidelines for the highly erodible land categorization, how those have changed.
Well, one of the big changes in the Farm Bill, and it was quite controversial, was adding the requirement that farmers comply with the highly erodible land and wetland requirements in order to be eligible for crop insurance. The way it ended up was that you've got to follow approved plans and meet the wetland requirements in order to receive the subsidy on the crop insurance program. So it is a new change, and I think the insurance industry as well as our farmers and landowners are going to be looking at that change.
Dairy producers will have a bit of a change coming in the near future. The milk income loss contract is going to change. When does it change, and what does it change to?
Well, essentially the milk program under the prior Farm Bill has ended, and starting September 1st, the margin protection program goes into effect under the new Farm Bill. So we're going to do our training at the Farm Service Agency later this month and be prepared to start sign up in the new program in September.
For producers that might not be aware of that change, is it going to be a big change for their operation? Could it be a big change for their operation?
It is a big change from what we've been doing with the dairy program the last few years, and it will require those operations to take a close look at what fits them best under the new program.
For more information on any of these programs, you can contact your local FSA office. Next week, we'll have more on ARC PLC options with UNL Extension Public Policy Specialist Brad Lubin. The August Nebraska farmer says no-till and cover crops will be the weapons to combat rising energy prices in the future. In this month's issue, Ray Archuleta tells crop producers energy will be the most expensive factor in the 21st century. Because of that, the NRCS agronomist says crop production systems must be low input and rely on no-till and cover crops to rebuild soils. You can read his comments about energy costs and soil health in the August Nebraska Farmer. Now with this week's weather forecast, here's UNL Extension State Climatologist Al Dutcher.
Well, folks, here we are again for the weekly forecast. Of course, we had some big thunderstorm activity across a good portion of the central one-third of the state last weekend, and some very heavy precipitation in north central and central Nebraska that did cause some localized flooding and unfortunately some significant hail damage. But more importantly, significant enough moisture hit north central Nebraska to see the complete elimination of abnormally dry and drought conditions. We did introduce some abnormally dry conditions across portions of the Panhandle, particularly from the Chadron area southward toward Sidney. And then in eastern Nebraska, really not much of a change in the drought monitor because most of that precipitation that hit the center part of the state really lost its steam as it moved eastward. And even though we did receive anywhere from a half an inch to 1.5 inches, it basically was fairly close to normal precipitation and was not sufficient enough to see significant reductions in the drought. Now, we do have continual chances for precipitation, particularly in the eastern half of the state during this next 7-day period, and much warmer temperatures. After the very cool temperatures we've been seeing for the last few weeks, this would be welcome relief. How long it will continue remains the open question. So let's take a look at the upper air models and see what we can expect as we go through this period. First thing I'll draw your attention to is that we have a ridge over the southwest and we have this trough that's coming in from the northwest. So as this trough tries to push this ridge southward, we'll see the moisture train coming across the Dakotas and off in through eastern Nebraska. So for this afternoon, we would expect thunderstorms to develop in northern Nebraska and possibly slide toward the east-southeast, impacting eastern Nebraska. Western Nebraska just looks like isolated chances at best. As we go into tomorrow, we'll see that ridge starts to buckle a little bit farther toward the south. The trough comes in a little bit farther southward, and that will bring up the thunderstorm activity in the Dakotas, and some of that making through northern Nebraska and eastern Nebraska. Primarily, again, development in the afternoon, late evening hours, and then moving eastward during the overnight hours. As we go into Monday, we will see that trough shifts toward the Great Lakes, keeps most of the precipitation chances to extreme northeastern Nebraska and points to the east, with just an isolated chance for thunderstorm activity for the remainder of the state. On Tuesday, that system starts to clear the Great Lakes. We start to see the ridge building back in, so we'll start to see warmer conditions building back into western Nebraska, close to normal across eastern Nebraska, and thunderstorm activity riding down the periphery of this ridge would bring the chance for scattered thunderstorm activity to the eastern one-third of the state. Now on Wednesday, we see another trough starting to build in, so we're starting to develop a confluence zone between these two areas, and there's a possibility of isolated thunderstorms statewide on Wednesday. Not a widespread event, but there is that opportunity for precipitation. As we get into Thursday, trough day is a little bit deeper. That's going to bring in some warmer air from the southwest, so our temperatures are going to be easily in the 90s statewide, with even an 100-degree reading possible in the western part of the state. And on Friday, trough day is a little bit deeper, and so we're going to see much more warmer air moving into our region, and we might jump our temperatures a couple more degrees. So widespread mid-90s to 100-degree readings are likely. Now as we look at the temperature forecast, you can see that the heat is on in the west. We'll see normal temperatures in the east until we get in the midweek period, and then we go well above normal. Chance of scattered thunderstorm activity statewide. Now as we go into the 8 to 14-day forecast, next Thursday, the following Tuesday, that trough starts to make its way into the northern plains, bringing cooler conditions. In terms of precipitation, we do see the chance for precipitation breaking out across a good portion east of the Rocky Mountains.
Thanks, Al. Today's interviews can be found on the Market Journal website and through the Market Journal mobile app. They include information on corn and soybean markets, hog prices, scheduling the last soybean irrigation of the season, and livestock emergency programs. Next week, Jim Robb will be our cattle market analyst, and Lauren Giesler will discuss emerging problems in soybeans. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Jeff Wilkerson. We'll see you next week.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board. The Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Funding for Market Journal is provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board.
A diesel-powered engine on a farm works hard and operates in a grueling environment. Soy biodiesel fuels stand up to the challenge of powering farm equipment, but are also renewable and environmentally responsible as well. The Nebraska Soybean Board is committed to encouraging the use of soy biodiesel to protect the environment and sustain Nebraska's agriculture. The Nebraska Soybean Checkoff, growing opportunity from the ground up.